The truth about Deku and Ochaco, the truth about that mysterious new villain, and the ultimate ending of the entire MHA series. There is so much to talk about. I can't believe there is only one more chapter left to wrap everything up, so let's get into it. You guys know the drill. If you enjoy my videos and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment for that YouTube algorithm. And if you want to be sure to catch my review of the very last MHA chapter, definitely subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. The previous chapter continued the time skip in the aftermath of the Great Villain War. The heroes and hero students continued to clean the debris and help rebuild Japan after all the destruction caused by the war. And we saw that Edgeshot is still alive and kicking. He's still that little weird string guy, but now he has arms, which implies that he seems to be slowly growing and he may eventually grow back to normal. Maybe? I don't know, I'm pretty confused now about how this quirk even works and how he's able to even survive in this miniature form. Like, is he even human at this point? Anyway, we saw that a lot of the regular citizens of Japan are grateful that the heroes are helping them rebuild after the war, and even more importantly, they are willing to do their own part to make things right again. This is huge, because in the past, a lot of civilians just expected the heroes to take care of all their problems, and that led to big problems with the system and with people in need of help like little Tenko Shimura slipping through the cracks. The fact that everyone is now taking responsibility for the well-being of society is an important improvement, and it gives us hope that the tragedies of the past will not repeat themselves. But even though in general things are looking up and everyone seems to be positive about the future, Deku, Tsuyu, and the other Class 1A students have noticed that one person doesn't seem to be acting normal. It's not blatantly obvious because Ochaco has been trying to act normal and to hide her inner turmoil, but the others are noticing that something is off about her, that she isn't quite herself anymore after the war ended. The following night, Ochaco leaves the dormitory by herself, claiming that she's going to visit her family. But when Deku hears from Tsuyu that Ochaco hasn't been answering her texts, he decides to look for her. Deku finds Ochaco in that place where they had talked before, and he sees just how upset she actually is. Now that no one is there to see her, or at least now that she thinks that no one is there, Ochaco drops her fake smile and she begins to cry. And she's not just crying a little bit, she's basically bawling her eyes out. We then got confirmation that Toga did really die during the final battle against Ochaco when she decided to inject her own blood into Ochaco to save Ochaco's life. But the world doesn't know that this is what happened because the battery of the camera that the reporters were using to record the fight died before they could capture how the fight ended. This means that no one actually knows how Toga died. They don't know that she sacrificed her own life to save Ochaco. So for the rest of the public, Toga was just a villain who died in battle against a hero. But Ochaco knows the truth and she feels terrible about it. Toga, the person that everyone else sees as an evil villain, died so that she could live. And while Ochaco is glad that things are looking up again and that everyone else seems upbeat and positive about the future, she is still feeling a lot of pain and guilt about Toga's death. She has been holding it all back and keeping it bottled inside because she didn't want to ruin anyone else's mood, but now that she is alone, she can finally cry and let her true feelings out. Only she's not really alone because in the final panel of that chapter, Deku showed up and called Ochaco's name, meaning that the long-awaited emotional one-on-one conversation between Deku and Ochaco was going to happen in the very next chapter. The Izuocha ship could set sail in the next chapter, so did it happen? Is this it? The latest chapter actually starts off with the big mystery character from chapter 425. That mysterious villain-like character who was suddenly introduced and then not mentioned again until now. The literal second last chapter of the entire series. We begin with a narration from this new character's perspective. And I'm sure you're thinking, okay, this guy must be important, right? I bet this is literally Deku's dad, and this is when we learn why he hasn't been around this whole time. Well, it turns out that this guy is actually a boy. When he was first introduced, I thought he was an adult, but it seems like he's actually closer to a teenager, although we don't know the exact age. Anyway, he was one of those people who manifested a rare quirk that had no relation to the quirks of his parents, and these quirks are overpowered and also potentially extremely dangerous, kind of like Aries' quirk. When his quirk manifested, the guy's family became scared of him because of his insane powers, and so they decided to lock him in an underground chamber in the basement of their family home, and they essentially treated him like a prisoner from that point forward. Not only was he kept as a prisoner against his will, which is a horrible form of abuse all on its own, but he also had his mouth sewn shut so that he couldn't scream and cry. That is absolutely despicable. This guy was essentially trapped underground and restrained like an inmate at an asylum just because of the quirk that he happened to manifest. For all we know, he didn't even do anything wrong. His family was just afraid of his quirk, and so to be safe, they decided to treat him horribly and inhumanely. Years passed, the guy doesn't even know how many years, and then the villain war came. The man's family became convinced that the entire country was doomed, and so they fled. We don't know where exactly they went, maybe they left Japan altogether, but we do know that they left this man locked underground. Although they were apparently kind enough to leave some food and water for him, so there's that. But since he was stuck there and there was no one else to take care of him, he would have eventually starved to death anyway. However, during the villain war, the carnage and destruction spread to the city where this guy's house was located, and some kind of explosion destroyed part of the house and finally freed him from his captivity. He was finally out, but he was scared, lonely, and confused because he hadn't been able to leave his underground prison for so long. And yet, even though his family members had said that the country was doomed and that everyone had to flee, the man found a completely different situation when he went outside. People were not destroying each other and treating each other poorly. Rather, they were smiling and working together. They were working to rebuild society after the war, and they were optimistic about the future. As this traumatized guy tries to make sense of this strange outside world, the chapter shifts focus back to Deku and Ochaco. Picking up where we left off last time, we see Ochaco crying because she feels so guilty that she only survived because Toga sacrificed her own life to save her. When she sees Deku, Ochaco tries to pretend like nothing is wrong, and she asks how he even managed to get up there. Deku explains that he used One For All to jump up there because he still has some One For All embers left. Deku and Ochaco had already had an important talk in this location before, so he thought that she might be here. Ochaco explains that she didn't want anyone to see her, because as we know, she didn't want her sadness to ruin anyone else's positive mood. But Deku says he's known for a while that something was wrong with Ochaco, and that she just hasn't been herself. As Deku does his best to console Ochaco, we see a montage of past scenes in the manga that showcase how kind Ochaco is and how she always puts other people ahead of herself. Then, as Deku walks up to Ochaco to hug her, we see that he is also beginning to cry, surprising no one. Deku says that Ochaco has always been the one who was there for him. She was always the one who saved him, ever since they first met at the entrance exam. And Deku has a point here, like for example, when he accidentally activated Black Whip and didn't know how to control it, Ochaco was the one who helped him. Or when they didn't want to accept him back into the UA after the Vigilante arc, Ochaco was the one who stood up for him and convinced everyone to let him enter. Because of this, Deku says that Ochaco is his hero. He also says that he doesn't want to have to rely on her strength forever. And he tells her that holding someone's hand can make you feel better. This eventually leads to an embrace between the two of them, although the hug isn't explicitly romantic in nature. I mean, it could be, I think it is, but it could also be just two friends consoling each other. Horikoshi just doesn't want to end the debate right here. He enjoys seeing the fandom burn. Ochaco explains why she has been feeling so sad. Toga died because she gave up her own life to save Ochaco's. If only things had been different, if Ochaco hadn't been so gravely injured, or if someone could have reached out to Toga sooner, then this wouldn't have happened and both Toga and Ochaco could be alive today. Clearly, Ochaco feels a lot of guilt and sadness over what happened to Toga, and she can't just move on like nothing happened. She needs help dealing with this and processing it, and she has been trying to do it all alone while pretending that everything is fine, and it just hasn't been working. But now, finally, she has someone to share her pain and to support her through this. Ochaco feels sorry for Toga because the very nature of her quirk made her an outcast, and this set her on a path to villainy from a very early age. If only someone could have reached out to Toga when she was still a child and tried to help her, maybe things could have been different. It's kind of poetic when you think about it, but even though Toga had this natural urge to drink the blood of others, and this is what made everyone fear her, she also had the ability to help others by giving them her own blood, just like she did to Ochaco. However, no one ever gave her a chance to showcase that other side of her. Don't get me wrong, Toga still did terrible things that you can't excuse, but it is an interesting way to think about the character and what might have been. Deku has similar feelings and regrets about Tenko, aka Tomura, who also died during his own final battle with Deku. Just like Ochaco with Toga, Deku didn't directly kill Tenko, but he still feels guilty that he wasn't able to do more to save him and prevent him from dying in the end. Deku wishes that someone would have helped Tenko earlier when he was much younger, because maybe things could have turned out differently. He basically has the same exact regrets regarding Tenko that Ochaco has regarding Toga, and this allows them to bond. Deku is hopeful that in the future, they as heroes will be able to reach out to more people and help more people, which will hopefully prevent them from meeting the same tragic fate as Tenko and Toga. In that moment, we see the rest of Class 2A arriving at the same location, surprising Deku and Ochaco. They were all worried about Ochaco, so I guess they all decided to follow both her and Deku to make sure that everything was okay. Bakugo asks Deku how the embers of One For All are doing, and the rest of the class is surprised to hear that even though Deku lost One For All, he is still able to use it once in a while, at least for now. The narration, which is now from Deku's perspective, says that One For All was finally fully completed through the heroism of many people. Now is the time for all of them to create something together, to build a better future together, One For All. The chapter then pulls away from this scene, and we get a few other heartwarming scenes involving the UA students and also little Eri. We see that the UA building has been fully rebuilt now, and that Naito Monoma got to have a bust of himself installed outside the UA in honor of his contribution to the effort to defeat Shigaraki during the war. He is obviously very happy about that, and I'm sure he is obnoxiously gloating about it as we speak. We also see that the students are throwing a farewell party for Aoyama, who, as we know, decided not to go back to UA in order to make up for his actions as the UA traitor. As Jiro plays her guitar at the party, she invites Eri to sing. And as we know, when Eri saw Jiro singing during the school festival, she decided that she wanted to sing just like Jiro one day. Eri then starts singing and gets really into it in an adorable way, which brings cheers and smiles from all the students present. The chapter then shows us a quick discussion between Hawks and All Might. Hawks, who is the new president of the Hero Public Safety Commission, wants to make sure that the concept of heroism is no longer strictly defined as the job of a licensed pro-hero. Many members of society who are not pro-heroes can do heroic things, and this makes society a better place. So Hawks thinks that there should be a way to recognize and honor them as well. He wants to revamp the current pro-hero rankings in order to reflect that. After all, even the greatest hero can't be everywhere at once, so they need to create a society of heroic citizens where everyone tries to do their part. Again, this speaks to the idea that the new hero society cannot just rely on pro-heroes to solve every problem. Everyone has to work together and do their part, which will ensure that no one slips through the cracks. And speaking of that exact thing, the chapter then takes us back to that mysterious guy who has been trapped underground by his family. As he looks at the people around him, this character is upset that everyone seems to be so hopeful and doing well, while he's been suffering this entire time. He starts to become resentful, and we see some sort of strange dark liquid emerging from his fingertips, suggesting that he is about to activate his extremely overpowered and dangerous quirk. But just before he does something dangerous, someone grabs his hand, and his quirk deactivates. The person who grabbed his hand is the same old lady who didn't help little Tenko when she had the chance all those years ago. It turns out that this lady often wonders what happened to the little boy that she refused to help that day, and whether a hero ever showed up to help him. This means that she doesn't even realize that the kid she failed to help ended up becoming Tomura Shigaraki. Even though she doesn't know what happened, she still thinks about that kid, and she even loses sleep over it. After seeing how much Deku had sacrificed during the war arc, she doesn't want to make the same mistake again. She wants to help this person who is clearly distraught and in need, and so she tells the mysterious character, "Sonny, it's fine now because Grandma's here." When he hears these words, the guy turns with tears in his eyes, and for a brief moment he looks a lot like little Tenko did all those years ago. Now Deku and Ochaco happened to see this exchange between the old lady and the new guy, and they smiled when they realized that they wouldn't have to be the ones to intervene and help the guy in need, because a civilian had already stepped up to do it for them. The chapter ends with the words, "A society where heroes have time to spare," which was Hawks' way of saying that he wants to create a safe and peaceful society where everyone helps each other, and where heroes don't have a lot to do because they are not needed very often. On the final page, we do see Deku and Ochaco walking hand in hand and smiling, their body language suggesting that they might be a couple now, but there's still no official confirmation, so we have to wait to see if anything gets more concrete in the final chapter. The last chapter could pick up where we left off, or it could give us another time skip that shows us our favorite characters when they've already gotten older. So if that's the case, then we will likely know who ends up with whom. We'll know which ships will sail, and which sections of the fanbase will lose their minds on Twitter for months to come. Personally, I do think that Izuocha should and will happen, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Okay, so now we know that the mysterious man from chapter 425 was not Deku's dad. He was a potential new villain, maybe even someone who could have become a Shigaraki level threat, but the threat was diffused because the hero society has changed for the better. And that's exactly what Horikoshi wanted to convey by introducing this character. The cycle of violence and allowing people to slip through the cracks like little Tenko did is finally being broken because everyone is taking responsibility for creating a better world. And all of this is because Deku inspired them to be better. They are no longer just expecting pro heroes to do everything, and that's a good thing, because no matter how incredible superheroes are, they can't do everything and be at all places at all times. And yet, that still leaves us with the question of what is really going on with Deku's dad. Either Horikoshi is gonna go back on what he said earlier about introducing him before the end, or he is going to introduce him at the very last moment in a way that might not be very satisfying. After all this time we've been hoping that there's gonna be some interesting and compelling reason for why we still haven't seen Deku's dad in the series. If he really just shows up in the final chapter and says, "Oh yeah, I was working abroad the whole time," it'll be something, but not exactly a super hype or satisfying end. Or Horikoshi could go a different route altogether and make another MHA movie that finally introduces Deku's dad. That way he can keep teasing the fans even after the manga ends, and he can still motivate us to see the movie, which will make him a lot more money. Now that I think about it, that is probably the smartest way to go since he's waited this long already, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in the next chapter. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think will happen in the final chapter. Will we get more of the same, just kind of wrapping things up but staying in the current time frame? Or could we see a long time skip that shows us our favorite characters as adults, shows us who ended up with who, and so on? I can't wait to see what the final chapter brings after 10 freaking years. This is crazy. If you're looking for another epic MHA video to watch next, check out my full MHA playlist, link on screen and in the description. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoy seeing my videos. And if you don't want to miss my in-depth review of the final chapter in the MHA series, please subscribe and hit that notification bell right now. It's really important.